Zexlar stared at the small blue planet through the viewport of his stealth craft, Earth. The third planet from a yellow star in an unremarkable spiral galaxy. His mission was clear: scout the planet, assess its defenses, and report back to the Artheon Empire. The invasion would follow soon after. The ship's computer finished creating his human disguise. Zexlar had studied Earth's languages and customs for months before this mission. He knew their basic social structures, their primitive technology, and their main weaknesses. Humans were emotional, unpredictable, and divided by invisible borders. The perfect target for conquest. Identity fabrication complete, the computer announced. Human name, Frank Miller. Occupation, freelance writer. Origin, no fixed hometown, allowing for knowledge gaps. Zexlar nodded. The cover story would work. Well, writers could ask strange questions without raising suspicion. They could be odd and still fit in. Perfect for an alien spy. His ship landed silently in a forest clearing outside a small town called Pinecrest. According to his research, smaller communities would be easier to infiltrate than the massive human cities. The ship camouflaged itself as a large boulder and would stay hidden until he needed to send reports back to the Empire. Zexlar, now Frank, stepped onto Earth soil for the first time. The air felt different from the recycled atmosphere of Artheon ships. It smelled of plants, soil, and 1,000 other things his sensors couldn't immediately identify. His disguise felt strange against his true skin, but the holographic projection and physical enhancements would make him appear completely human. He checked the small bag containing Earth currency and identification documents. Everything was in order. Now he just needed to find a place to establish his base of operations. Frank walked into Pinecrest as the sun rose. The town looked peaceful in the morning light. Small houses lined quiet streets. A few humans were already outside retrieving newspapers or walking small animals on leashes. None of them looked like warriors. This would be even easier than expected. The first building he entered was called Pinecrest Coffee Shop. Inside, humans sat drinking dark liquids and staring at electronic devices. Frank had studied these behaviors and knew how to mimic them. He approached the counter. "Good morning, you're new in town, aren't you?" The woman behind the counter smiled at him. Her name tag read, Beth. Frank forced his face into what he hoped was a friendly expression. "Yes, just arrived. Looking for a place to stay while I work on my writing." Beth nodded. "We don't get many newcomers here. What kind of writing do you do?" "Research mostly. Articles about different communities and their customs." The lie came easily. "Well, Mrs. Palmer has a rental apartment above her garage. It's nothing fancy, but it might work for you. Her place is just down Main Street, the blue house with the white fence." Frank thanked her and ordered a coffee to blend in. The liquid tasted bitter and strange, but he drank it without showing any reaction. On Artheon, showing weakness was dangerous. Even here, undercover, old habits remained. By noon, Frank had secured the apartment, unpacked his few belongings, and begun mapping the town. The rental was small, but sufficient. Mrs. Palmer, an elderly human with white hair, had asked few questions beyond his name and occupation. She seemed pleased to have someone in the empty apartment. "Dinner's at 6 if you'd like to join me," she had said before leaving him alone. "Nothing special, just pot roast." Frank had nodded, though he wasn't sure what pot roast was. His nutrient supplements would sustain him, but eating human food would help maintain his cover. His first real mission objective was to locate any military presence or defensive capabilities in the area. The initial scans from orbit had shown no major bases nearby, but humans were known to disguise their weapons facilities as civilian structures. Frank walked through the town center, noting the government building, police station, and fire department. All seemed minimally staffed. He located the power grid connections, water supply, and communication towers. Basic infrastructure, easily disabled when the invasion began. As he made notes on his disguised data pad, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "You must be the new guy in town. I'm Katie Dawson, the librarian." Frank turned to see a young woman with curly brown hair and glasses. She carried several books and watched him with friendly curiosity. "Frank Miller," he replied, remembering. to extend his hand as humans did when meeting. Her hand felt warm when she shook his. Beth at the coffee shop mentioned we had a writer in town. What brings you to Pinecrest? We're not exactly a hotspot for excitement. I'm working on a piece about small-town America, the people, the community, how everything works together. In truth, he was studying exactly that, but for very different purposes. Katie's face brightened. Then you've come to the right person. The library is the heart of Pinecrest. We have all the town records, local history, and I pretty much know everyone. I could help with your research. This was an unexpected opportunity. Librarians were information specialists. She could provide access to data that might otherwise take weeks to gather. That would be very helpful, Frank said. When would be a good time to visit? I'm heading back there now. You're welcome to come along. Or tomorrow, if that works better. Frank glanced at his datapad. He had planned to map the eastern section of town next, but this opportunity seemed more valuable. Now works well, he said. The library was larger than he expected for such a small town. Inside, shelves of physical information storage, books his training reminded him, lined the walls. The smell of paper and some kind of polish filled the air. So what specifically are you researching? Katie asked as she moved behind the main desk. Community structures, decision-making processes, defense systems. He caught himself on the last one. I mean how communities defend against natural disasters and such. If Katie noticed the slip, she didn't show it. We had a flood 3 years ago that tested our emergency response system. I can show you the newspaper coverage and town meeting minutes. As Katie gathered materials, Frank observed the other humans in the library. A man helped a small child select a book. An elderly couple sat reading side by side, occasionally showing each other passages. None of them appeared threatening or suspicious. Here's some of what you might find useful, Katie said, placing a stack of folders on the table. And we're having a community potluck this weekend. If you want to see Pinecrest people in their natural habitat, that's your best chance. Potluck? The term wasn't in his cultural briefing. Katie smiled. Everyone brings food to share. It's at the community center Saturday at 6. Great way to meet people. Frank nodded. A gathering of town residents would provide excellent surveillance opportunities. I'll be there. As he left the library hours later with a temporary access card and more information than he had expected to gather on his first day, Frank felt strangely unsettled. The humans had been helpful, open, and friendly. Nothing like the selfish, aggressive species described in his mission briefing. That night, in his apartment, Frank sent his first report to the Artheon Command. He detailed the town's layout, noted the minimal security presence, and listed the critical infrastructure points. But when he tried to describe the inhabitants, he found himself pausing. These people weren't warriors or threats. They were just living their lives, helping strangers, sharing knowledge freely. For the first time since receiving his mission, Frank wondered what would happen to people like Katie when the invasion came. The thought troubled him more than it should have. 2 months passed. Frank settled into a routine in Pinecrest. Each morning he walked to the coffee shop where Beth now greeted him by name and started preparing his usual order before he reached the counter. During the day he gathered information, mapped important locations, and observed human behaviors. In the evenings he compiled reports for the Artheon Command. Frank's apartment no longer looked empty. He had acquired furniture, books, and even some decorative items to blend in better. Mrs. Palmer often invited him for dinner, and he found himself accepting more often than not. She told stories about Pinecrest from decades ago while they ate. Frank recorded these stories in his mind, noting how humans valued their history and personal connections. The community potluck had been an intelligence goldmine. Frank met nearly everyone in town and learned about their jobs, families, and connections to each other. He met George Simmons, a retired military man who now taught self-defense classes at the community center. Frank made special note of George in his reports. If anyone in town might suspect Frank's true nature, it would be someone with military training. He also met Olivia Wright, a kindergarten teacher who asked him to visit her class and talk about being a writer. Frank had agreed before realizing he knew very little about actual writing. He spent an entire night studying human literature to prepare. The children asked simple questions. Why did he like stories? What was his favorite book? Had he always wanted to be a writer? Frank answered carefully, watching their faces light up with each response. One small boy named Jake drew a picture of Frank with a rocket ship saying, "You look like you came from space." Frank's heart had raced until the boy added, "Because you're so tall." The library became Frank's regular workplace. Katie helped him find resources and introduced him to others doing research. She never questioned why a writer of magazine articles needed to know about the town's water supply or power grid. Instead, she simply pointed him toward the information and often joined him during her breaks. "You've been here 2 months and I still know almost nothing about you," Katie said one afternoon as they sat in the reading area. Outside, rain poured down, making the library feel cozy and safe. Frank tensed. Had he made a mistake? "What do you want to know?" "Anything." "Where? Did you grow up? Do you have family? What made you want to write about small towns?" These were questions Frank had prepared for, but sitting across from Katie, his rehearsed answers felt wrong. Lying to government officials or store clerks was part of the mission. Lying to Katie felt different. "I grew up very far from here," he said carefully. "My family is not close. We have different values." Katie nodded. "Family can be complicated. That's why I like Pinecrest. People build their own families here in a way." "You mean reproduction without biological connection?" Frank asked, confused. Katie laughed. "No, I mean friendship networks, people who choose to care about each other, like how Mrs. Palmer has practically adopted you as her grandson." Frank hadn't considered his relationship with Mrs. Palmer that way. On Artheon, family units were for breeding and training only. Once offspring reached training age, parents rarely saw them again. The idea of choosing family connections was strange but intriguing. "Is that why you invite me hiking and to local restaurants? Are you adding me to your friendship network?" Frank asked. Katie's cheeks turned pink. "Well, yes, but also because I enjoy your company. You see things differently. You notice details others miss." Frank felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. On Artheon, being noticed for being different was dangerous. Here, Katie valued it. That evening, Frank struggled with his report. The Artheon command wanted updates on military capabilities and weaknesses. Frank had plenty of information about infrastructure vulnerabilities, but found himself unwilling to share details about the people. He omitted names and specific locations, focusing instead on technological assessments that wouldn't endanger individuals. As weeks passed, Frank's reports grew increasingly technical and vague about human behavior. His commander sent messages questioning the lack of detail about potential resistance. Frank created plausible excuses about needing more time to infiltrate security networks. In truth, Frank spent less time gathering intelligence and more time experiencing human life. Katie took him to a music festival in a nearby town, where he felt sound vibrate through his body in a way that reminded him of Artheon ceremonial rhythms, but with joy instead of military precision. Peter Martinez, who owned the hardware store, taught Frank how to fish in the lake outside town. They sat for hours in comfortable silence, something Frank had never experienced before. On Artheon, silence meant someone was hiding weakness or planning an attack. Here, it meant friendship. When a severe storm hit Pinecrest one night, Frank watched the community transform. Roads flooded near the river, threatening several homes. Without being ordered, people gathered at the community center. George Simmons organized teams to fill sandbags. Olivia Wright set up a care area for children while their parents helped. Katie managed supplies, directing people and resources where needed. Frank joined Peter's team, lifting heavy sandbags with ease. His Artheon strength allowed him to work, faster than the humans, though he carefully moderated his pace to avoid suspicion. As rain soaked them all, no one complained. No one left their post. They worked together to protect homes belonging to people Frank had never even met. "Thanks for your help, Frank," George said, clapping a hand on Frank's wet shoulder. "That's what neighbors do." That night, Soaked and tired in his apartment, Frank sat before his communication device. His scheduled report was due. He described the storm and the town's response system, noting the efficiency of their emergency protocols. But as he tried to frame this cooperation as a weakness the Artheon could exploit, the words wouldn't come. On Artheon, unity came through fear of punishment. Here, unity came through genuine concern for others. Frank had been sent to find weaknesses, but instead he was discovering strengths his own society lacked. For the first time, Frank sent his report without describing any new vulnerabilities. Instead, he requested more time, claiming the storm had delayed his intelligence gathering. As he sent the transmission, Frank realized something unsettling. He no longer looked forward to the day the invasion force would arrive. His gaze fell on a small plant Katie had given him for his apartment. "Something to keep you company," she had said. The plant needed care and attention to survive, just like the connections Frank was forming in Pinecrest. He touched one of its leaves gently, wondering what would happen to it, to all of them, when his mission ended. 6 months into his mission, Frank woke to an urgent alert from his hidden communication device. He slipped out of bed and locked the door to his apartment before activating the secure channel. The face of Commander Vexcor, his superior in the Artheon fleet, appeared as a hologram. "Scout Zexlar, your mission timeline has been accelerated," Commander Vexcor said without greeting. "The invasion fleet has advanced its schedule. We require final intelligence within 30 days. Frank kept his face neutral despite the shock. "Understood, Commander. May I ask the reason for this change? Resources on our primary mining worlds are depleting faster than projected. Earth has been upgraded to immediate acquisition status." The commander's expression hardened. "Your reports have become increasingly sparse. The High Command questions your effectiveness." Frank stood straighter. "I've been methodical to avoid detection. Rushing could compromise the mission. Then do not rush, but do not delay." The commander transmitted a file. "These are your new orders. You will place surveillance devices at these key locations. Pay special attention to the dwelling of the human called Sam Reeves. Our intelligence suggests he works on their primitive defense systems." Frank opened the file and saw a map of Pinecrest with several locations marked. One was Sam's house on Oakwood Drive. Frank had met Sam at the community center several times. He was a retired engineer who often helped kids with science projects. Frank had never suspected he worked on classified projects. "Additionally," the commander continued, "you should be aware of Phase 1 of the invasion plan." A second file appeared showing a distribution pattern across North America. "This bioweapon will eliminate approximately 80% of human population centers while preserving infrastructure. Your location has been noted for protection during deployment." Frank stared at the map, each red dot representing thousands of deaths. Pinecrest was marked as a test deployment site. Names and faces flashed through his mind. Katie, Mrs. Palmer, George, Olivia, Peter, little Jake from the kindergarten class, and dozens of others he now knew by name. "Is there a problem, Scout Zexlar?" The commander's voice cut through his thoughts. "No problem, Commander. I am processing the tactical approach." "Good. We expect your first enhanced report in 3 days." The transmission ended. Frank sat on the edge of his bed, the bioweapon map still glowing in the dark room. The Artheon Empire had used similar weapons before on other worlds. Frank had never questioned it. Those species had been even more alien to him than humans. But now, the next day, Frank went to the hardware store and bought small tools he would need to place the surveillance devices. Peter chatted with him about an upcoming fishing competition while ringing up the purchase. "You should join us, Frank. There's a team category. And I need a partner who knows the difference between fishing and just sitting by a lake drinking beer." Peter laughed as he handed Frank his change. "I'll think about it," Frank said, forcing a smile. He spent the afternoon walking around town, scouting the surveillance locations. Each one was strategic: the water treatment plant, the police station, the cell tower, the school, and Sam's house. As Frank passed the school, he heard children playing in the yard. Olivia waved to him from where she watched her students. "Frank, we're having an art show next week. The kids have been asking when. You'll visit again?" Frank waved back, unable to speak. Next week, he would be placing devices that would help destroy their world. That evening, Frank sat before his communication device but couldn't bring himself to send the report. Instead, he went for a walk and found himself at the library. It was closed, but he saw light in the back office. He knocked on the window. Katie looked up from her desk and smiled when she saw him. She came to the door. "Frank, everything okay?" "I was just passing by," he lied. "Working late?" "Grant application for new computers. Boring, but necessary." She studied his face. "You look troubled. Want to come in and talk about it?" Inside her office, Frank sat across from Katie's desk, but couldn't meet her eyes. How could he tell her that everything about their friendship was based on a lie? That he had been sent to help conquer her world? "Have you ever had to do something for work that you didn't want to do?" he asked finally. Katie leaned back in her chair. "My first library job wanted me to remove certain books because some parents complained about them. I refused and got fired. That was brave. Or foolish. But I couldn't be part of limiting access to information." She reached across the desk and touched his hand. "What are you being asked to do, Frank?" The warmth of her touch made his holographic disguise tingle. For a wild moment, Frank considered telling her everything. Instead, he said, "My publisher wants me to write something that feels harmful." "Then don't write it," Katie said simply. "It's not that easy. There would be consequences. There are always consequences, Frank. The question is which ones you can live with." When Frank returned to his apartment, he made a decision. He took the first surveillance device and carefully modified its internal components. When placed, it would appear to function normally, but the data it transmitted would be useless. He did the same with each device working through the night. The next day, Frank began placing the modified devices around town. He reported their successful deployment to Commander Vexicor, but included subtly altered data about Earth's defenses, making them appear both more vulnerable and less valuable than they actually were. For 2 weeks, Frank maintained this deception, hoping to buy time while he figured out what to do next. But his behavior had not gone unnoticed. As he left the library one evening, a stranger approached him. "Beautiful evening, isn't it?" the man said. He was average height with light hair and wore casual clothes like any human, but Frank immediately sensed something wrong. "This planet has such pleasant seasons." Frank tensed. "Yes, it does. I wonder, does your publisher know you've gone native?" The man's eyes flashed their true Artheon color for just an instant. "Scout Zexler, I am Secondary Scout Mevrel. You may call me Alan Baker while we're here." Frank kept his expression neutral despite his racing heart. "The commander sent you to check on me. The High Command questions your loyalty. Your reports contain discrepancies." Alan smiled coldly. "I'm here to evaluate your work and determine if you remain useful to the Empire. My cover is established. Your presence risks exposing both of us. Then you'll help me establish my cover quickly." Alan handed Frank a human business card that read, "Alan Baker, journalist. I've rented a room at the Pinecrest Inn. We'll meet tomorrow to discuss your progress. Until then, I'll be watching you." As Alan walked away, Frank stood, frozen. His deception had been discovered. Now he faced an impossible choice: betray his people or betray his friends. Because somehow, without noticing exactly when it happened, the humans of Pinecrest had become his friends. Frank looked toward the library where Katie was just turning off the lights. He thought about Mrs. Palmer, who had invited him for Sunday dinner again. He remembered the children who waved to him when he passed the school. They trusted him, and he had 30 days before their world would change forever. Frank met Alan the next morning at a quiet corner table in the coffee shop. Beth greeted Frank warmly but gave Alan a curious look as she took their orders. "Your cover is impressive," Alan said once Beth walked away. "The locals clearly trust you." "It took months to build that trust," Frank replied. "What exactly are you here to evaluate?" Alan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Everything. Your surveillance placement, your intelligence gathering, your loyalty to the Empire." He leaned forward. I've reviewed all your reports. The early ones were detailed and useful. The recent ones are vague and technical. Why? Frank chose his words carefully. Humans are more complex than our initial briefing suggested. I focused on technical data because it's more reliable than social observations. Yet you spend considerable time engaged in social activities with them. Alan's voice hardened. The library, community events, dinner with the elderly female. These serve no intelligence purpose. They strengthen my cover identity. Beth brought their coffees, smiling, at Frank. Your usual, Frank, and a black coffee for your friend. Thanks, Beth, Frank said. When she left, he noticed Alan studying him. The humans include you in their social unit. This affects your judgment. Frank tasted his coffee to avoid answering. Immediately. I maintain professional distance. We'll see. Alan stood. I'll be conducting my own assessment over the next few days. The spring festival is this weekend. I'll see you there. He left without touching his coffee. Frank watched him go with a growing sense of dread. Alan would be watching his every move, looking for signs of disloyalty, and Frank had already committed several acts that would be considered treason by the Empire. In the following days, Frank felt Alan's presence everywhere. When he visited the library, Alan was browsing books nearby. When he stopped at the hardware store, Alan appeared moments later. Even during his usual walks around town, Frank spotted Alan watching from a distance. Katie noticed Frank's tension when they met for lunch. You seem distracted, she said. And who's the guy who keeps showing up wherever you are? An editor? Something like that, Frank replied. Alan is evaluating my work. He looks at you like he's taking you apart in his head, Katie said. I don't like him. Frank almost smiled at her protective tone. He's just doing his job. Well, his job seems creepy. Katie changed the subject. Are you coming to the spring festival on Saturday? The whole town will be there. I'll be there, Frank hesitated, then added, Katie, if something happened, something bad, would the people here be able to work together, to protect themselves? Katie studied his face. You're really worried about something, aren't you? Is it this Alan person? Is he threatening you? Not exactly. Frank couldn't say more without risking everything. Just answer the question, please. Pinecrest has faced floods, fires, and economic hardship, Katie said. Every time people step up. George still has military connections. Sam knows government people from his engineering days. We're stronger than we look. Frank nodded, feeling both relieved and more worried. The people of Pinecrest might fight back against an invasion, which meant they would be targeted more aggressively. Saturday came, and the spring festival transformed the town park into a celebration. Colorful booths lined pathways between blooming trees. Children ran with ribbons streaming behind them. Music played from a small stage where local bands performed. Frank found himself enjoying the festival despite his worry. Mrs. Palmer insisted he try her award-winning apple pie. Peter challenged him to a ring toss game. Olivia's students presented him with a book of stories they had written, with illustrations of Frank as a character in each tale. As the afternoon progressed, Frank lost sight of Alan and began to relax. Katie found him watching a dance performance and stood beside him, their shoulders touching. I've been thinking about what you asked, she said quietly. About people protecting themselves. Are you in some kind of trouble, Frank? Before he could answer, screams erupted from the children's play area. Frank turned to see a large festival decoration, a metal sun on a tall pole, falling toward a group of kids. Without thinking, Frank sprinted across the park, moving faster than a human could. He reached the children just as the heavy decoration crashed down. Frank caught the metal structure with one hand, holding it above the frightened children. The weight would have crushed a human, but Frank's Artheon strength made it manageable. He guided the children away with his free hand, before carefully lowering the decoration to the ground. Parents rushed to grab their children, thanking Frank, through tears. He looked around, suddenly aware of what he had done. Nearby, Alan watched with a cold smile, recording the incident with a small device. Later that evening, Alan confronted Frank behind the community center. "Quite a display of non-human abilities," he said, showing Frank the recording. "The Empire will be interested to see how thoroughly you've exposed yourself." "I saved children," Frank said. "It was instinct." "Yes, human children." Alan's voice dripped with disgust. "You've gone native, Zexler. You've betrayed everything the Empire stands for." Frank straightened his back. "Maybe I've just discovered what's actually worth standing for." "Treason, then. You admit it." Alan reached for a hidden device in his jacket. "I'm sending this report immediately. When the invasion comes, you'll be executed alongside your human friends." Frank lunged forward, grabbing Alan's wrist. "Don't do this. Listen to me first. These people aren't what we were told. They're not just resources to be harvested or obstacles to be removed. They create, they care, they build communities. They're primitives," Alan spat. "Resources for the Empire, nothing more. You've been here less than a week. I've lived among them for months. They have value beyond what the Empire can take from them." Alan's expression showed only contempt. "The High Command was right about you. You're contaminated by sentiment," a voice called from nearby. "Frank, are you back here?" It was Katie, looking for him after the incident. Alan used the distraction to break free from Frank's grip. He pressed a button on his device before Frank could stop him. "Too late," Alan hissed. "I've just activated the emergency signal. The invasion fleet now has direct coordinates to this location." Frank heard Katie approaching. He had seconds to decide what to do. His cover was blown. Alan had reported him. The invasion was coming sooner than planned, directly to Pinecrest. "Katie, stop," Frank called out. "Don't come any closer." She appeared around the corner, concern on her face. "Frank? What's going on? Everyone's looking for you after what happened with that decoration. How did you lift that thing?" Alan smiled cruelly. "Yes, Frank, tell her what you are. Tell her how you've been studying her world for conquest." Katie looked between them, confused. "What is he talking about?" Frank took a deep breath. The time for lies had ended. "Katie, I haven't been honest with you. With any of you." He reached for the holographic projector hidden on his wrist. "I'm not who you think I am." Frank deactivated his human disguise. The hologram flickered and disappeared, revealing his true Artheon form. Taller, with iridescent skin and eyes that reflected light differently than human eyes. Katie gasped and stepped back. "Frank?" "My real name is Zexler," he said. "I was sent here to study your world before an invasion. But I've been working against that invasion. Everything I've learned about humans, about you, has shown me that my people are wrong." Alan laughed. "How touching. And completely useless. The fleet is coming, and now they know exactly where to find us." Katie stared at Frank, her face a mixture of fear, betrayal, and confusion. "This can't be real," she whispered. "It is real," Frank said, stepping toward her with his hand outstretched. "And we don't have much time." Katie backed away from Frank, her eyes wide with shock. "You're an alien this whole time?" Her voice trembled. "Everything was a lie." "Not everything," Frank said. "My friendship with you, with everyone here, that became real." Alan laughed. "How touching, and completely meaningless now. The fleet has our coordinates." "How long?" Frank asked, turning to Alan. "The advanced ships will arrive within days. The main invasion force weeks." Alan smiled coldly. "This town will be the first test site for the bioweapon." Katie shook her head. "This can't be happening." Frank made a quick decision. "Katie, we need help. Get George and Sam. Meet me at the library in 20 minutes. Please trust me one more time." Katie hesitated, then nodded and ran back toward the festival. "She won't return," Alan said. "She'll alert authorities." "No, she'll come back." Frank moved quickly, grabbing Alan's arm and twisting it behind his back. "And you're coming with me." Frank took Alan to his apartment and bound him with modified equipment from his hidden supplies. Then he gathered everything he would need: his communication device, technical tools, and the data he had collected. The real data, not what he had sent to the Empire. At the library, Katie was waiting with George and Sam. Their faces showed confusion and fear, but they had come. "Katie told us a crazy story," George said, his military training evident in his stance. "Said we should hear you out before calling anyone." Frank deactivated his human disguise again. George reached for a weapon that wasn't there. Sam simply stared. "It's really him," Katie said quietly. "It's Frank, just not human." "My real name is Zexilar," Frank explained. "I was sent here by the Artheon Empire to prepare for an invasion, but I've been sabotaging my own mission because I believe the invasion is wrong." "Why should we believe you?" George demanded. "Because I could have completed my mission months ago. Instead, I've been sending false information, delaying as long as possible." Frank looked at each of them. "But now time has run out. Another scout, Alan, has alerted the fleet. They're coming directly to Pinecrest." Sam spoke for the first time. "If this is real, what exactly are we facing?" Frank explained quickly about the Artheon technology, the bioweapon, and the invasion timeline. Sam asked technical questions that Frank answered honestly. George wanted to know about Artheon military tactics. Katie said nothing, just watched Frank with an expression he couldn't read. "We need to contact the government," George said when Frank finished. "They won't believe you in time," Frank replied, "but I can help you prepare defenses that will work against Artheon technology." "I still work on classified projects," Sam admitted. "I have connections. If you give me proof, they might listen." Frank handed Sam a data device. "This contains everything I know about Artheon technology, including weaknesses in their ship's shields." "I need to take this to people I know," Sam said, standing. "George, come with me. We need your military experience." As they prepared to leave, Frank said, "There's something else. There may be other scouts like me, ones who have doubts. I can try to reach them." "Do it," George said. "We need all the help we can get." After they left, Frank turned to Katie, who still hadn't spoken. "I understand if you hate me." "I don't hate you," she said finally. "I'm trying to understand who you really are. Was any of it real? Our friendship? The things you told me about yourself?" "I lied about where I came from, but not about who I am," Frank said. "The person you know, the one who loves books and quiet talks and helping neighbors, that's the real me. I just didn't know it until I came here." Katie looked at him, really looked at his alien form for the first time. "Your eyes are still the same," she said softly. Frank used his communication device to broadcast a message on a secure Artheon channel that only scouts would monitor. He spoke in his native language, describing his experiences on Earth and appealing to any scouts who might have similar doubts. He didn't expect much response. To his surprise, within hours, 3 scouts replied. They had been stationed in different regions but shared his concerns. They promised to provide intelligence to human authorities and to work against the invasion from within. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Sam's contacts took Frank's information seriously after preliminary tests confirmed the alien technology was real. George used his military connections to establish a defense perimeter around Pinecrest. The government quietly evacuated surrounding areas while keeping the situation contained to prevent panic. Frank worked tirelessly, explaining Artheon weaknesses and helping develop countermeasures. Each night, he returned to the library where Katie had set up a command center of sorts coordinating communication between various groups. She worked as hard as he did, never mentioning the betrayal, focused only on saving their town. When the advanced ships arrived, Earth was ready. Using Frank's intelligence, they targeted specific vulnerabilities in the Artheon vessels. The first wave retreated after suffering unexpected losses. Messages from Frank's fellow defectors confirmed confusion in the main fleet. The Artheon command had not anticipated resistance, especially not targeted resistance that exploited their specific weaknesses. They had expected an easy conquest, not a fight. After the initial victory, Government officials approached Frank. "We need to establish diplomatic channels with your people," one said. "Find a peaceful solution." "The Artheon Empire doesn't negotiate," Frank replied. "But there are those who question the endless expansion. If we can reach them, then you'll be our ambassador," the official said. "A bridge between worlds." Frank wasn't sure he deserved such trust, but he agreed to try. Weeks later, after the immediate crisis had passed, Frank stood on Mrs. Palmer's porch. She had insisted he keep his apartment despite knowing his true nature. "Alien or not, you still need a place to call home," she had said. Katie joined him there, bringing a new plant for his window. "The other one survived, you know," she said. "Even with everything that happened." "Like Pinecrest," Frank said, "surviving against the odds." "Is it strange?" Katie asked. "Being caught between two worlds?" Frank looked at the town he had come to love. Children played in yards again. Stores were open. The library lights shone in the evening darkness. His mission had changed completely, from conquest to connection. "I'm not caught between worlds," he said. "I've found where I belong." Katie took his hand. His real hand, not the holographic one he had used for months. So the scout couldn't bring himself to leave after all. "How could I leave home?" Frank asked, and for the first time since, arriving on Earth, he felt completely honest and at peace. The Artheon Empire would return someday. Earth's defenses would need to grow stronger. There would be challenges in building understanding between such different worlds. But looking at the stars with Katie beside him, Frank knew that some connections were worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth building a future around. He had come to study humanity as an enemy. He would stay to help them as a friend. And in doing so, he had found something the endless conquest of the Artheon Empire could never provide: a place to belong.